welcome back. And of course, our good friend, Mr. Rondell Fields, is on set. He's the president of the Single Fathers Association. And we're dealing domestic violence against men. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Morning. Thanks, all
right, so you're here, Brother B, of course, and Mr. Cox, all right? All right, so let's get into it. Statistically, what are the numbers in terms of reports of men or men reporting issues of domestic violence? So you put it that way.
Well, I can't give you the exact statistic, but I know it's been increasing over the last years. I know how that really say that. But I don't have the exact statistic on me at this point in time. There has been an increase. I think, not to be held accountable for the number, but I think I have heard it's doubled in its amount. However, I'm certain it still isn't at the level that it needs to be. And I mean, we know socially and culturally it's because many of our time, men who report these things of this nature are in fear of, just as similarly, you hear women say they are in fear of people of scorn, they are in fear of people looking at them with disdain and these kind of negative social outlooks at reporting when it comes to domestic violence.
And what are the cases? So let's start the physical, because we know there's domestic violence has the emotional, psychological, and so on. But let's talk about the physical cases where the female actually, is violent against her spouse. Talk to us about those cases and what are the reports like? Do you have men coming with a black eye or a broken nose or a broken hand? Talk to us from that standpoint as to that level of physical violence that you know of.
Yeah, we have many men who I'll say I have many men that have come to me. I mean, I don't want to speak about it in too much depth right now, and I don't want to connect his past abuse to his action that he might have committed. One of our past and founding members would have taken his life earlier in the week, and I know in the past he would have verbally expressed. We have videos with him. He was on the documentary on male domestic violence, male who suffer from domestic violence. I wish condolences to the family. As I said, I don't want to interconnect this now because he had separated from the marriage from his action this week. I know he had other things that had caused him also to go into a lot of depression and other things as well. So, I must extend condolences to the family before I even speak any further on it as well. But there have been men, and he was one of those men. Also, there was Ken Gransall, who I highlighted about 2 weeks ago, who was thrown out of his home. Why hit him with a bottle in the head? All these kind of things. There are a number of men who are abused by women, who are hit by women. Many of us, I don't know, honestly, if any man, particularly in my generation, could say that he was never struck by a woman. They just didn't report it, or they just didn't see it as abuse. So,
and sometimes men may be hit with a fine or a ruling by the court to pay, whether it be child support or whatever the case is, because of a situation that they're dealing with their spouse. And let's just look at that for a moment with regards to some of the systemic laws that work against men and men treating with that. From your perspective and based on your experience dealing with men throughout the years, is this a concern for males?
Follow the question clearly. What you're saying that is the laws that are in place, seeing that they may be insufficient in certain places, is it a concern for males pertaining to domestic violence?
Precisely that.
Very good. Well, it's a concern generally. I would say what is more of a concern is the culture that we have. And because we have a particular culture, because boys are cultured a particular way and boys grow into men, we are not seeing the type of, even if the laws are there, then the laws will not apply because the laws are very broad, right? It's not domestic violence laws don't apply to women also. They are applicable to men as well. But the impact of culture on the perception of the law is where the issue is. So many men may think that these things don't pertain to them. When you hear domestic violence, you've seen certain imagery in our past. When you see gender-based violence unit ad talking about domestic violence is a man beating a woman in a room and the child watching from outside. So you send subliminal messages not only to the man that he cannot be in the status of victim, but you send it to the boy as well. So the boy grows up with the ideology that he cannot be a victim of domestic violence. So because of this culture, even if there are laws that are supposed to protect men as well, if you don't see yourself as a victim, then you don't see yourself, then you don't see it as something worthy of reporting. When you talk about sexual abuse, how many young boys could relate? I sat in a room of men the other day, Trinidadian and Tobagonian, talking about things we experienced as boys with women who are adults. Did we think we were being sexually abused? Of course not. Because the culture told us that if we were able to engage in acts that are of our sexual nature with women older than us, that we had a particular machismo or sexual prowess. Whereas the culture with a young girl, an adult man, is an entirely different thing. So our greater issue is that we have cultured boys never to see themselves as abused, but always to see themselves as the abusers. So they are more aware looking at themselves to ensure that they don't become abusers, but they are hardly ever aware to look to see if they're ever being abused, whether it be sexually or whether it be violently.
That's interesting. In terms of the abused man, male, is the approach totally different when treating with solution and coming out of that state of being abused when you compare males as opposed to females?
But the solution will have to be definitely different now, because part of the solution of dealing with males is first letting them know that, hey, you can be abused. We have this culture, how young boys think, and even how grown men think as well. So that even the grown men themselves, when they pass in messages down, or grown women, when they pass in messages down to their sons, they understand that they identify certain type of behavior as bad behavior to them. So the cliches that are in existence, like the one I just explained about young boys having sex with older women, being viewed upon as better young boys than those who can. The views we have as well, when you tell a young boy, never hit a woman, but you don't ever tell them, don't allow anybody to put their hands on you as well. So that is why I was telling Brother B, I cannot say for sure if there has been any man who has never been struck by his girlfriend or who has never been struck by his lover.
Well, I
He,
mean,
however, has done nothing about it.
all right. Well, in some instances, and let's bring that to let's speak to that directly, right? So there are cases where you may offend your female companion. In some cases, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, and wife, or you may do something that she views to be very insulting to her, and her reaction is to hit you a slap in the face. All right. Sometimes it happens in the public. It happens at home. And he does not react or retaliate because he's guilty. Now, and that's her way of expressing her hurt. Let's speak to that, because what happens there in some cases, it may be a one-off outburst of emotional reaction given the nature of it, and she responds violently. Now, and we can put that in a bracket, and then there's the constant following verbal attacks. Let's say the incident happened maybe 5 years ago, and that comes up, and that is the cuss in the house that, and so on. It is not physical anymore, but it's verbal. Let's speak to that. So he's constantly reminded of this incident that happened maybe 10, 20 years ago. Speak to us from that standpoint.
And that is it. The city boundaries need to be clear, because I'm pretty sure if you caught her cheating and you fold your hand into her fist and cock the life out of her, or just hit her one lash, it would have been a whole different response socially. So why are we thinking it is normal for anybody or any grown adult to put hands on anybody, and whether it's a one-off situation or not? Boundaries must be set clearly, and in event it does happen, whether woman to man or man to woman, those boundaries must be set clearly that this is not good behavior and it must not continue. Because if you allow it, I'm certain you will be struck again, whether you are the woman or you are the man, and you have been struck and you do nothing about it. You will be struck again. Whether you decide to what level to escalate the first offense, whether you decide to legally escalate it through the protection through the courts or through the police, which is a legal right to do so, or you decide, okay, I'm going to go to the pastor, I'm going to go to the pundit, I'm going to go to the imam, and let me have a discussion. But something must be done that this type of behavior is discontinued. Use a similar scenario. Chris Brown in 2017, he came out and told the exact scenario of what took place between him and Rihanna. And that is exactly what took place. She saw text messages of somebody he was with, and she started to assault him, and he responded in similar light. So the thing is, this initiation of violence could only set a bad precedent for the relationship going forward. Until one party decides to go and make a complaint after. To deal with the verbal part of it, verbal abuse is something, as I say, mentally can frustrate and then lead to physical abuse. That is my take and view on that. Is that if the persons are not in emotional control at any level, to manage the emotions so that they don't have a bad reaction, it will eventually lead to some form of violence or separation later down the road anyhow.
All right. All right. The last time we spoke, you said that women have a place to go to. There are a number of shelters for women and all of that. However, the man who is hurting, who needs counseling, as you mentioned, maybe a pastor, a pundit, whoever, there is no place for men, no shelter, quote unquote. To treat with the hurt that men are going through, because in some cases they go and they complain to their partner who drink a half together or smoke some weed, and after they head past, they still have the problem. Let's talk about the counseling that men need who are abused, be it verbal, psychological, sexual. Should there be a place for that, Mr. Fields?
Of course, there must be a place for that. There must be a place for everybody to be able to distress, every member of the family unit, even children as well. And I think we've seen these things put in place for children and women, and we haven't seen it in the same magnitude put in place for men. I think if anywhere is available, it's very few, it's hardly advertised, it's little spoken of, it's not in a communal space, most of the time it's in a centralized space. All these things, the geographical location and these things are very, very critical if you want to have meaningful impact on intervening in these or put in places that are distressors, particularly for men. They must be built and they must be based in a way that is attractive to men. So many men have now improvised. They want to take a football sweat. They want to take a basketball sweat. So you need to use these spots and these places possibly to see if you can transition them into greater distressor points for men. You understand? And I continue to say so. You need to have facilities. They don't make sense. They have a distressor place for a man and they don't have something that will engage him in a way that he likes to be engaged. And men are physical beings most of the time, no matter what. Most of them. So I think there hasn't been the right concern, there isn't the right research, and there isn't the right data, and there isn't the right move toward putting these places of these distress units, for lack of a better description, that will help men distress. And I think it is important because if the man has a place to distress, if the woman has a place to distress, I think these are the times and these are the places that they will get good counsel, good advice to be able to go back and strengthen the relationship that they have with their partner. I'm not even certain the places that women have actually to distress them or just a shelter. Go and rest your head there and run from this man in an abusive relationship, or go and rest your head there. But I am not sure if it's a place that is actually built, focused even for women to be able to truly distress and get some of the issues or manage the emotions in a more constructive way.
And what can be done to reduce the stigma? A man may be a victim and he's considering the stigma that would be attached to him if he make a report or if he even have a discussion with a friend or in any one of these institutions if available. What can we do as a society to debunk that stigma?
Public messaging is a very strategic part of it, and that is why I raised the alarm. Without saying I raised the alarm earlier about the messaging coming out from the gender-based violence unit. Gender-based violence unit, gender is man and woman. So long and short of the story, you must be able to show a balance and the type of abuse that both genders suffer. And that is critical and important. You're supposed to come out, and I shouldn't be the only person coming to talk about violence against men, and I'm pretty sure I might be one of the only ones you get. But you're supposed to have somebody from the gender-based violence unit. You have to have people communicating to the public about and meaningfully, not just reading something off a paper, meaningfully mentioning to the public, letting men know that you can be victims as well. Letting women know that they can be abusers as well. Because if they themselves don't know that some of their behavior is abusive, they will continue to do it. Because socially they have been cultured to do so. Socially, men have been cultured to behave and to receive and accept certain type of behavioral patterns. Just as I explained in the two excuses, in the two examples I gave before. You understand?
Okay.
So it's about messaging and communication, and I think culturally we'll start changing a lot.
All right, and in wrapping up, I'm getting to wind up, and always a pleasure having you. So when do we start the network that you spoke about? Obviously, your organization is very vocal, and it seems as though it's you alone. Are there other interest groups, so to say, or stakeholders with the same interests, intending to find a space where men can be heard with their varying hurts?
I mean, it's safe for B-men, you guys have in Tobago. I can't strongly say that men truly advocate the position. There are a lot of men or a lot of groups that claim to be male activists, but pander around a lot of very critical and important points. And it is true. And it's knowledge to those who are involved that if you say certain things, many of the international and powerful funding organizations won't fund you. And those guys who rely on possibly funding for their organization, you're not going to get them to say certain things that the Single Fathers Association or Fathers Association or who branded going to say, or even the B-men may come out and say. But the reality of it is that we realize that we're in a male crisis. Males don't understand their identity anymore. They don't know what they could do, where they could go, how they could do anything in the society. And males without vision is a blind society. We don't want any section of the family not understanding their purpose, their role, their function in the family unit and in wider society.
Okay. All right. We want to thank you, sir, and always straight to the point, and we really appreciate your contribution this morning. All right. Thank you very much, and all the best. Merry Christmas, by the way.
Same to you.
All right. So at this point in time, we go for morning news. When we